Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me here on the first edition of the second best seat in the house. Of course, whoever sits in the second best seat of the house is just above home plate. And with me, as always, for the rest of the 2019 season will be my boy, Steve Schuster with the Winnipeg Goldeyes. Good morning, Steve, all the way from Texas, where finally the 2019 regular season begins. Good morning, Steve. How did you sleep last night, and how excited are you for the beginning of the season?
What's going on, Theo? Great to be on. Thanks for having me this morning. Was up late last night, actually finishing up some odds and ends for our media package this morning, but real excited. It's the opening day is special no matter what the level of baseball is, and we can't wait for 7 o'clock to get here tonight, that's for sure.
So Texas, the Air Hogs finished in the bottom of the division last year. We'll get to them in a little bit. I guess the big question was for manager Forney was finalizing the roster. 12 pitchers, 11 position players, 23 in total, 1 inactive. Is that a normal style roster that you see in AA ball?
Yeah, very much so. The American Association, for a long time, it was actually a 22-man roster, and teams, they would go with 11 pitchers and 11 position players, so it was split right down the middle. And I believe it was 2 years ago, it was 2017, the league allowed teams to carry a 23rd player, and a lot of us were actually kind of curious to see how managers would utilize this spot. And, to be honest with you, Theo, a lot of us thought that teams would gravitate towards a 12th hitter, so they could have 3 guys basically on the bench to pinch hit or pinch run every night. But as it turned out, and this is exactly what Winnipeg did a couple days ago, most teams actually used that 23rd spot for an extra bullpen arm, so they went with a 12 pitcher, and that's again, that's what Rick did on Tuesday. There were a couple of tough decisions along the way. Corral Prime was he was released. A really great person, really good player, but I don't know. It's going to be fun to watch it kind of unfold beginning tonight.
Absolutely. Like you talked about the pitching, you have 8 strong arms from the right and 4 from the left, and that was a concern Forney had going into these last couple of days, trying to solidify getting another left-handed pitcher, grabbing, I believe it was Christian Torres near the deadline. Is that correct?
Yeah, really, it's there was a point where we weren't sure if we had, we're going to break camp with any left-handed relievers, and right now we have 2 potential guys in Joel Bender and Christian Torres, who you just mentioned. But Christian, he's valuable, because he's a very good pitcher, obviously, but also he has a lower classification, so he doesn't dip into the experienced roster spots or the limitation in experienced roster spots that the clubs have. So, and the other great thing about Christian, and we got a chance to see him on Tuesday in Kansas City, is that he's not one of those one-batter lefty specialist type guys. Like, he's had success against both righties and lefties, and he's also had success as a starting pitcher. So he kind of fill a lot of different roles in addition to being, what appears to be our primary lefty out of the bullpen this season.
Right on. So, like you said, you mentioned Bender and you mentioned Torres from the left. Great veteran right-handing pitchers, I should say, returning in Mitch Lampson, Kevin McGovern. Mitch leading the Goldeyes, I believe, last year with a 3.81 ERA from a starting standpoint. And McGovern was only 1 strikeout behind having the lead last season at 129. Do you look for those 2 pitchers to kind of carry a brunt of the big work starting out and being those leaders as starting pitchers?
Yeah, it definitely looks that way, and sure enough, those are they're going to go 1 and 2. So Kevin's going to get the opening nod tonight, and Mitch is scheduled to pitch tomorrow. Both did a great job last year. I think Kevin's ERA was very misleading at 4.73, and he'll be the first one to tell you that his 2018 maybe wasn't quite as good as his 2016 or 2017, but if you look at the peripherals, he was 3rd in the league in strikeouts. He threw a ton of innings, so he was out there pitching, as much as anybody in the American Association. He had low walks. His home runs were very reasonable. So I think that 4.73 run average was very misleading for Kevin last year. He set an entire offseason of rest, and I know Kevin, Rick Forney, everybody involved, they're really excited about Kevin and his possibilities of really bouncing back and having a big season, and hopefully that starts in game number 1.
For sure, for sure. During the spring training, seeing the Goldeyes go 4-3. Dylan Thompson, who's another right-handed pitcher, he had his contract bought by the Boston Red Sox. How exciting is that for a player, knowing that they have this opportunity to play AA ball, but then get a chance to move into the AA, AAA system with some of these major league teams and still have their dreams somewhat satisfied still?
Yeah, it's a great story, and I only met him for a few days, obviously in person, but he was just a super nice person. Grew up in North Carolina and has had some great success in the American Association, and I think it goes to show you too that with opening night now, like he hadn't actually pitched in a real game yet for Winnipeg. I think it goes to show you that. Major league teams, scouts, talent evaluators, they're always watching and they're always kind of paying attention and following. So you never really know when a need might arise in an affiliated organization and at one of their minor league clubs that guys can get picked up in this league at any time. So it was a great story for a real nice kid. And, hopefully he's going to get into a game here for Salem sooner rather than later.
So we see one player leave the organization for a brief moment. We see another player return from, actually several players, but one more dear to our heart only because he played for the Goldeyes several years ago, being third baseman Wes Darvill. He replaces Maz at third base, but more importantly, he brings a season where he was in the Dodgers organization, and he comes back to Winnipeg. How exciting is it to see him playing the hot corner and his chances to come back to play for the Goldeyes?
Yeah, it's fantastic news, and he's Canadian too, so that's a big part of the draw. So we're really excited to have Wes back, and I know his season last year, unfortunately, it was hampered by an injury. He missed a couple of months. He had hyperextended his knee, and I know the batting average may not look the best, but he felt really good in terms of his ability is where he was at physically and mentally as a baseball player, and he really believes that a lot of the strides that he made last year in the Dodgers organization, that's going to carry over hopefully this season for Winnipeg. You just have that extra experience. He's done a really good job working hard in the gym this off season. He's probably added a solid 10 pounds of muscle to his upper body. So we're he did great things for Winnipeg, in 16 and 17. So it may be hard to take it a step further, but I think that might be the case with what we've seen so far in spring training from Wes.
I mean, Wes is definitely out of the hot bat, especially in 17, like you mentioned, batting well over 300, which was fantastic for him. He's kind of like that, that Swiss Army knife in the infield. I mean, he bats well, he hits well, he plays the infield extremely well. He reads the hit and runs, he reads the bunt play extremely well. It's great to see him playing third base again here for Winnipeg, and we'll catch him next Friday when they finally come home off of this quick opening road stand. Talk about our outfield here real quick. Steve, you got the stalwarts in Reggie and Josh playing center and right, and Willie Garcia, is he going to be playing the left? And he's got a pretty big talent, a pretty big arm from what the scouts have seen him in his earlier years and being his 9th season playing ball.
Yeah, it's I'll tell you what, look, we have to see everything play out, but I think you're hard pressed to find a better outfield, collection of outfielders. I mean, let's put it this way: it's so good. One guy is probably going to DH every night because you've got the two former major leaguers in Reggie and Willie Garcia, and then you've got Josh Romanski and James Harris, and those two guys have won MVP awards over the last couple of years. Josh in 2017 in the American Association, and James Harris, he was the front two league MVP last year, and he was probably one of the 2 or 3 best Goldeyes offensively in spring training over the last couple of weeks. So, they're all dynamic offensive players. They all can play more than one outfield position. So, I think that'll also help in the long run where, Rick will have the opportunity to, spill a guy when you get into the dog days of summer where you don't have to play 100 games at the same position, in the hot weather for the entire season. You can get a day off, so to speak, as the DH, where you keep the guys bat in the lineup, and you're keeping his legs fresh by getting him off the field. So it should be a real dynamic outfield. I'm really excited about both the 2 new guys in Harris and Garcia, but certainly for the 2 guys that are coming back in Reggie and Romanski.
So James Harris, we mentioned, playing the outfield. Kevin LaChance, who has crossed the home plate the most for the Goldeyes in the preseason, played in that Frontier Indiana program as well. Is LaChance and Harris, are they linked somehow, coming together, or is it just by luck of the draw they played in the same league last year?
Yeah, it's so I would say it's more luck of the draw that they're both coming over. They were acquired in different trades. James came over from it was a team in Pennsylvania called the Wild Things. So he was acquired from Washington in exchange for it was actually Jordan Ebert who coincidentally ended up in Sioux Falls in a separate deal. And then Kevin came over. There was a trade that Winnipeg had made over a year ago, actually, with a team in they're called the Lake Erie Crushers. They're just outside the Cleveland, Ohio area, and Winnipeg had sent them a player last year for a player to be named later, and Kevin was that player to be named last December. So, yeah, those two guys are in separate trades, but yeah, you mentioned Kevin. He looked really good in spring, and he's right now kind of penciling as the so-called utility guy, but I wouldn't be surprised if he got a fair chance to kind of show what he can do this year and maybe get a decent amount of it back.
Well, then I have to ask you this real question, because you talked about veteran spots and different distinctions based on their level of play. How does that work for filling in a roster real quick, Steve? For those of us that don't know, like the juggling that is required based on how many spots are available per credential of a player.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's probably the best way to explain it is to kind of work from the bottom up. So I think a lot of fans are pretty familiar with the veteran rule. So you can have 5 veterans, no more than 5 classified veterans in your roster. But the real limitation is they have the classifications. It starts at rookie, and then it goes up to LS1, and then LS2, 3, 4, 5, and then veteran is at the top. Teams can have a max of 11 LS4 players. 7 of those 11 can be LS5, and then the 5 of the 7 LS5 spots can be veterans. So you really got to kind of juggle the 4s, 5s, and vets. It's not just the veteran rule that you have to pay attention to. So Winnipeg is maxed out with its veterans right now, but they actually have an LS4 spot available. So if a need were to arise, Rick could jump at a potential player maybe that has AA or AAA experience without having to move another 4 or 5 or veteran, whereas other teams who are maybe at their capacity for experienced players, it's not just a baseball decision for them, it's kind of a baseball and a classification decision. But yeah, so Winnipeg has a little bit of flexibility in that regard. But yeah, so it's 11 total 4s, 5s, and vets, and then you kind of work out 7 5s and 5 vets out of that pool of 11 players.
So you're not just throwing in 23 vets and just saying, here's my team, let's go beat them all up.
No, that's that's what makes it hard. It makes it challenging, but I think at the same time, I think it makes it fun. It makes the league more interesting. That scenario you just mentioned, it actually exists. I mean, that's basically what the Atlantic League does, where there's no classification requirements. You can just sign the 23, 24 best players that you can find. And, that's why the Atlantic League has a lot more of these former big league players or the former AAA guys. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I think the overall talent there is higher on average, because they have more ex-big league players. But at the same time, because of the limitations, we get a nice dynamic in the American Association where you have some of the ex-big leaguers, but you also have leaders. So you have probably the best position of what you might see in the major leagues. For example, you have Lincoln. We saw them on Sunday in a spring training game. They have a 22-year-old kid that went undrafted, Jake Owens, who throws hard, and he's a really good pitcher. Throws 95 miles an hour. And, last year was his true rookie season. He's on the same field as Willie Garcia and Reggie Abercrombie, who have time in the major leagues. And, he gets to face them, and Willie and Reggie, they get to face a kid that's basically straight out of college. So you get those types of matchups that I think bring a lot of intrigue that fans can find interesting. So, the roster classification, the limitations, it makes it challenging, but I think it's what also ultimately makes this league such a great product.
So we have live arms, we have veteran bats. What have you seen, Steve, in the first part of all of the spring training for the Goldeyes that has impressed you the most leading into the regular season first game tonight?
You know, the probably the thing that stood out the most is the team defense, and that was a point of emphasis for Rick and Tom Bates, who also plays a big role in the recruiting in the off season. You know, Winnipeg had a tough year defensively in 2018. Is one of the probably one of the biggest reasons why there was you know, such a tough year in the standings. I think Winnipeg was 9th in fielding percentage and committed the 3rd most errors. So, you know, as soon as last season ended, there was, you know, regardless of how the rest of the team shook out, there was a point of emphasis of getting a little younger, getting more athletic on defense. And in spring training, they looked excellent. I'm really excited to be here defensively tonight. A good surface to depend on, especially for the infielders. But you know, in spring training, we had the cold weather in Winnipeg. The weather wasn't really good at Fargo either. It's wet, it's cold. You're getting game reps for the first time in a lot of cases. You know, fielding ground balls or fly balls. So a lot of times the defense is actually, you know, kind of off the pace, so to speak, but you know that wasn't the case at all. The Goldeyes looked really good defensively. Adrian Marin, the new shortstop, made some real incredible plays to his backhand side that starts some double plays. So the defense should be fun to watch all the way around. Infield, outfield, you know, you got Kevin Garcia behind the plate again. So I would say the defense is probably what's excited me the most here coming out of camp.
That's great news. Like you said, you mentioned the fielding percentages and the errors were a huge part of a 41-59 record. I mean, it wasn't offense that wasn't the biggest struggle. It was more, like you said, the defense and maintaining and holding on to leads. It was a lot of the games that I attended last year, we were up 1 or up 2 going into the 8th and the 9th, and we just weren't able to hold on to those wins that we could have had. But I guess the last question I'll ask you, Steve, I mean, starting the season on the road, is that more of a benefit with there being less stress and being in front of your hometown, or would you rather start the game or rather start the season at home in front of your home crowd, having the second largest attendance and one of the greatest crowds really to support the Goldeyes year in and year out?
You know, I'm not sure if I don't think it's a stress. You know, to be honest, I think everyone, you know, loves playing. They thrive playing in front of the crowds in Winnipeg. But I do think it's definitely beneficial to start on the road the way the team has. You know, I think it's now the 8th year actually, or probably the 7th year where they've gone down to Texas. You know, again, it's still not quite baseball weather yet up north. So you can kind of work your way down south, continue spring training and the regular season where you're playing in more in conditions more conducive for baseball. You know, maybe a little less rain, some warmer temperatures, and you know, you have, especially this year, a lot of new faces. It also gives the guys the opportunity to you know, get to know each other you know, well enough over a couple of weeks where you know, you're on the bus a lot, you're in the hotels a lot, and you know, hopefully it's as close to a well-oiled machine as possible when the home opener comes around on May 24th.
And that is May 24th. It's a 3 or 4 game series against Kansas City to start off the home season.
It'll be 3 against Kansas City, and then we actually have a day off Monday, and then stay home, and then Gary comes in for that second series. So it'll be a week-long homestand beginning on May 24th.
Right on. So where do we hear the game tonight? What time are you starting the call, Steve?
Yeah, so we're probably back with 93.7 CGNU. So if you're in Winnipeg, you can tune in on the radio, 93.7 FM. If you're out of town or you're inside the home, CJNU.ca has the live internet stream, and we'll go on the air with a pregame show at 6:30. So I hope everybody can tune in, and looking forward to another great season.
Thank you very much for joining us. Kevin McGovern getting the start for the first game here for the Winnipeg Goldeyes 2019 season. This has been the second best seat in the house with Theo and Steve Schuster with the Winnipeg Goldeyes. Thank you, Steve, very much for joining us.